Hi again guys, and welcome to another installment of Rivals on Gran Turismo 6, and previously in the Rivals series we pitted the R34 Skyline against probably its nearest natural rival, the Supra RZ. That was a great battle between the two. They trade advantages and disadvantages quite well, but what though if you keep it in the family? Now with the Supras, there's not really much point in comparing the different generations of Supra because they're just so different. It's like with the different generations of Celica. They vary so wildly that the outcome doesn't really feel fair no matter how it goes. With the Skyline, on the other hand, you've got a number of different Godzillas, in effect, where it kind of came into its own around the R30 generation and really became the GTR that we know and love, and then of course as it progressed it went through different iterations, and we are pitting probably the three most popular against each other, the R32, 33 and 34. So first of all, let's break them down. First up we have the R32, and all three of these Skylines that we're going to be using are the premium versions. They may be a little bit more expensive than some of the others, but for the sake of the fully detailed interior, the visual options, etc., they're just the best all-round option, basically. They also happen to have usually the best numbers of any of their respective models and are, more often than not, the quickest. Now this particular car is my least favourite personally of the three. I know a lot of people absolutely love the R32, and if you're talking pure hardcore track day specials, the R32 really does have that covered. It's a less forgiving car than the R33 or the R34, and despite the fact that it has quite a bit less power, around 70 horsepower less than the R33 and over 100 horsepower less than the R34, it's still a force to be reckoned with around the track, as you'll see when we compare the lap time down below in the video here to the other two vehicles. Perhaps surprisingly quick, in fact. What though about the R33? Well, the R33 would have to be my personal favourite of the three vehicles. I like the fact that the R33 feels a little bit more unique among the Skyline range. The R30, R31 have a similar shape, and even the R32 and the R34 have a very similar, more boxy, even shape. Whereas the R33 is a bit rounder, a bit softer, and I personally prefer that. It's also quite easily the most tail-happy of the three, which makes it a great car for drifting, and personally I just love that handling signature that being more tail-happy gives the R33 in particular. In terms of power, it has, as we said, significantly more than the R32, not quite as much as the R34, but interestingly in a straight line. The R33 is just as quick as the R34, at least with my personal tuning. You're looking at around a 5 to 10 mile per hour edge over the R32, which is roughly the same kind of top-end speed without NOS or draft as the R34, and with slipstream I would actually give the edge to the R33, at least from racing that I've personally done around Route X. What though about the newest of the three, and possibly the most popular overall, the R34? Well, as you would expect with each generation of an iconic performance car, you would hope, at the very least, that each car would become better. On paper, of course, but definitely in practice. So is that the case? Well, on paper, it is definitely a strong car. It has far more power, significantly more torque, and it is more expensive, so you'd expect better numbers. That being said, the R34 is not the best in every way. The fact that the R33 in particular can have a flat floor, as can the R32, but with the R33 it makes the PP go so much higher that it actually outclasses the R34, which for some strange reason is not allowed to have that flat floor. Now you could say it's not fair to give the other two the flat floor advantage, but in terms of lap time I actually didn't use the flat floor on any of them, so it is equal in that regard. I'm only using the flat floor in this test for the on-paper numbers, because that's the potential that the car has. What though about those on-paper numbers? Which one wins on paper compared to which one was quickest around the track? Well, as we lay out the specs of each individual vehicle on paper, you can start to see ways, as usual, that certain cars have an advantage. The R34, as we said, has quite a lot more power, as you'd expect it to, but it's also more expensive and heavier, so there are payoffs to each individual vehicle. First of all, we have the price, and although the R34 jumps a little bit higher than the other two, the difference between the R32 and the R33 in particular is actually not that much. There's only $1,000 separating them. But, that being said, it separates in favour of the R32, and that's enough to give it the point there. As far as the engine capacity though, they're actually all exactly the same. 2,568cc or a 2.6 litre, and as such, they all get the point there. As far as PP, and this is a very interesting one, as I alluded to just now, the fact that the R34 cannot have that flat floor, for whatever reason, really does hinder it against the other two cars. The R32, despite being so much less powerful, is still right behind it. It's only 2 PP points lower, and the R33 is significantly higher at 657. Then, as far as power, we have the R34, of course, taking a point there with far more power than either of the other two vehicles, although, it has to be said, all three cars are, of course, extremely powerful and very fast in a straight line and around the track. As far as torque, well, again, it goes to the R34, but by a much larger margin than with power. With power, it's got a lot more than the R32 and a fair bit more than the R33, but for torque, it totally annihilates both of the other cars at almost 850 foot-pounds. So, of course, the point goes there to the R34 again. As far as weight, though, interestingly, and perhaps not too surprisingly, as it's often the way with older cars, the point actually goes to the R32. But again, not by much. It's only 2 kilos lighter than the R33, which is pretty impressive given the rounder, softer look that the R33 has, which could fool you into thinking that it's a heavier car than it actually is. But it really isn't a heavy car at all. Both the R32 and 33 weigh roughly the same as a WRC rally car, whereas the R34 has about 10-15 kilos more that it's carrying around. It's still certainly not a heavy car overall though. And finally, as far as horsepower per tonne, which is the final category that we're giving points to, again, not too surprisingly, the point is edged out to the R34 because although it does weigh a little bit more, the fact that it has so much more power just more than makes up for that to give it 772 horsepower per tonne. Again, the R33 is excellent in that regard, and just trailing a little bit behind is the R32. But still, 683 horsepower per tonne is not bad. That's certainly no slouch. That's in many cases beyond supercar territory. And as always, we are not awarding a point based on lap times, because there are just far too many variables involved. Different driver, different tuning, of course, different track. But without the use of the flat floor on any of the three vehicles, it is interesting to note, and I personally did not expect this, with my tuning in fully tuned form around this track, of course, with me driving, the R32 was actually the quickest of the three. In fact, the quickest went in reverse order. The R32 was the quickest, then the R33, and then the R34. And I reiterate, that is not with the use of the flat floor. With the flat floor, I have no doubt that both of them would have left the R34 standing by an even bigger margin. But, lap times aside, that does mean that our winner, despite being the slowest, ironically, of the three, is the R34 with, appropriately, 4 points. Then coming in second with 3 points is the R32, and finally in third with 2 points is my personal favourite, the R33. So a pretty good match between them. 4 points, 3 points and 2 points, going almost in opposite order. It's very interesting to see how in different ways each of these cars dominates. And despite the fact that they're all in the same genealogy of the Skyline or Godzilla, they all really do have their own personality. The R32 is a much more hardcore track-focused vehicle, the R34 is more of an all-rounder, and the R33 is a little bit more playful and tail-happy. All three cars are fantastic though, And that's it overall for this particular Rivals matchup, so I'll see you guys next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.